Hi everybody, I'm Celeste. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, it's November and the days are starting to get a little bit cooler out there. We did have a little bit of a strange heat wave for a day or two, but now the temperature is more seasonal. And you saw all the leaves falling at Mendon Ponds Park. I wanted to jump on today and just share a bit of a November book haul with you. Some of the books I've already read and some are on my TBR pile. There's quite a mix here. We have some cozy mysteries, and we also have some nonfiction for those of you who follow the nonfiction November tag. So hopefully those will be of interest to you as well. So let's get right into it. The first book that I wanted to share with you that I've read is Alan Bennett's The Uncommon Reader. And this is a bit of a classic by now. It's a very short novel, I would say a novella. And this is a special edition that was published by Hatchard's Booksellers of London. I specifically wanted to get a really special commemorative edition of this book, seeing as it was the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, and also because she did pass this year. And so I decided to buy this copy from Hatchard's. Hatchard's Booksellers in London. It's the oldest bookstore in London, in Piccadilly. It's been there since Georgian times, and it was established, let me look at my notes here, in 1797 by publisher and anti-slavery activist John Hatchard. And so yeah, I picked up this edition, and if you look inside, you'll see the lovely end papers that it has, and these are from William Morris and Company. So it's the story of the Queen, sort of a hypothetical what-if story in which Alan Bennett imagines that the Queen is out with her corgis one day, and the corgis kind of get ahead of her, and she finds herself in front of a bookmobile. And inside the bookmobile is not only the mobile librarian, but also someone who works in her kitchens named Norman. Well, Norman suggests a book for the Queen to read because she feels compelled to take one out now that she's in front of the library mobile. And so he makes a recommendation to her, and she reads it. And then she comes back and she starts reading more and more. It's a lovely premise for a story as we follow the Queen and her different reading tastes and what she thinks of each book and how she applies it to her own existence as monarch and public figure versus the private woman and what she'd sometimes rather be doing with her life. We follow her as she reads a wide variety of literature. There are a lot of authors and novels mentioned. It's a really humorous book. I was chuckling quite a bit as I read this. It's a very light, short read. It only will take you 1 or 2 sittings to complete it. But in a way, it's actually quite subversive. Alan Bennett is very clever in the way he writes this. It's written very comically and deceptively light, but there's quite a bit of subversiveness in here because it's imagining books and the effects that they do have on people and how that might affect their world outlook and therefore their decision-making process. And when we're talking about a monarch, this can really mean quite a bit, and how books make us reflect upon our own lives as readers, and it's about our private persona versus public persona. It's not lighthearted and charming to the point of being twee or precious. It's just well written. I really recommend it. This would be a great stocking stuffer if you have someone who enjoys reading about the Queen. It is a fictitious narrative, of course, but it's something you could really imagine happening. So, Alan Bennett, The Uncommon Reader. The next book that I wanted to share with you is a cozy mystery, because November is always such a lovely time to read a good cozy mystery and to cozy up with a blanket and a mug of something hot to drink. And so I chose Dorothy L. Sayers' Whose Body? Now, this is the very first book in the Lord Peter Wimsey series, and it was my first time actually reading Dorothy Sayers, surprise, surprise. And I'll read the premise on the back here. It was the body of a tall, stout man. On his dead face, a handsome pair of gold pince-nez mocked death with grotesque elegance. The body wore nothing else. Lord Peter Wimsey knew immediately what the corpse was supposed to be. His problem was to find out whose body had found its way into Mr. Alfred Thipp's Battersea bathroom. So we're introduced to Lord Peter Wimsey in this book, and I don't know, for those of you who know me, I am a huge Agatha Christie fan, and I think perhaps I was kind of expecting something similar in reading this. And I have to say, I wasn't thrilled with this as a first novel or introduction to Dorothy L. Sayers. It was very cute. It's very quippy. There's a lot of that I say good men, cheerio kind of banter between Lord Peter Wimsey and his man. But, and it is, fun to see and follow Lord Peter Wimsey as he solves the mystery of whose body was in the bathtub and who committed the murder. But I just found it so clogged with that banter and that, hi-ho, chipper, cheerio stuff that I lost interest and I kind of skipped ahead. I did end up watching an old television broadcast, and so I did enjoy the Lord Peter Wimsey televised series, but as an introduction to Dorothy L. Sayers, I wasn't thrilled. It was good. I would give it perhaps a 3-star rating, 2 3/4. I certainly will read some more Dorothy L. Sayers. And I'm hoping that they get better as we go along. The next cozy mystery that I read is Cover Her Face by P.D. James. And November really is a month of firsts for me, because not only was it my first Dorothy L. Sayers Lord Peter Wimsey novel, Whose Body, but it was also my very first P.D. James. And Cover Her Face is the first story in the Adam Dalgliesh series. And I had watched the TV series Dalgliesh, the first season, starring the actor Bertie Carvel. And I think that Bertie Carvel is just a tremendous and extremely versatile actor. I've seen him in a number of things, and he's really kind of like the Meryl Streep of male British TV for me. Very versatile, very convincing, great actor. So catch him in that series if you haven't seen it already. I wanted to specifically get this Faber and Faber edition. I love the cover artwork on here, and it's done by Angela Harding, and I really love her artwork. In fact, there's a calendar I have my eye on, an Angela Harding calendar that I'm asking for Christmas, and I love how the design kind of follows around on the spine and then is also on the back here. So, as I said, this is the first Adam Dalgliesh mystery. And I'll just read you the premise. St. Sed's Church Fete has been held in the grounds of Martingale Manor House for generations. As if organizing stalls as well as presiding over luncheon, the bishop and the tea tent were not enough for Mrs. Maxey on that mellow July afternoon. She also has to contend with the news of her son's sudden engagement to her new parlor maid, Sally Jupp. On the following morning, the village are shocked by the discovery of Sally's body. Investigating the violent death at the manor house, Detective Chief Inspector Adam Dalgleish is embroiled in the complicated passions beneath the calm surface of English village life. Well, unlike Whose Body, my first P.D. James reading experience of Cover Her Face was delightful, and I really enjoyed this murder mystery. I got into it from the very first paragraph, and it kept my attention all the way through. As Inspector Dalgleish interviews each of the suspects in the country manor and discovers who killed Sally Jupp, the parlor maid. I did have one nit with this, and it actually wasn't until the very last page. This was P.D. James' first novel, and it's hard to believe it because it's so well done. You know, she's got the prose style down pat, and she ticked all the boxes, but on the very last page, it's almost as if she had a sudden attack of writer's jitters and was wondering if maybe she should include some intimation of a romance for Dalgleish. It's not, I don't know if I would really call it a romance, but it's just kind of a hint that in the future we might run into a specific female character again. And it wasn't convincing for me. She's not the sort of woman I would imagine for Dalgleish. He's very sensitive, he's a poet, he's very intuitive about people, and she came across to me as rather harsh, at times superficial, at times selfish. So the fact that at the very end there's an allusion to him seeing her again in the future sometime just didn't ring true for me. I would have gone through this and done one last edit and perhaps taken that aspect out of it. But other than that, this was a really good read. I highly recommend it, and I'm definitely looking forward to the second book in the series. And then I read another cozy mystery. This was recommended by Janelle from the BookTube channel Too Fond of Books. You should check her out. She's got a lot of great mystery reads on there. And this is Agatha Christie's By the Pricking of My Thumbs. And by the pricking of my thumbs, of course, is a quote from Shakespeare's Macbeth. By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes. This was also delightful, and it was a great recommendation from Janelle, so thank you, Janelle. This particular edition was published by Dodd Mead, I want to say 1968 maybe, sometime around there. And in the book, it's a Tommy and Tuppence book. I should start out by saying that. And I've never read any Tommy and Tuppence books. I'm a huge Miss Marple fan. And I've also read a number of the Hercule Poirot novels, but this was my first Tommy and Tuppence. And ironically, this is one of the later Tommy and Tuppence books. Of course, there's The Secret Adversary and several others. In the novels, Agatha Christie does have Tommy and Tuppence age. And so in this particular later mystery, they're getting older and starting to feel the creaks in the body and arthritis and so forth, and getting gray in their hair. Hello. So I appreciated that as a detail for the characters. And it's just a really fun, cozy story. Tommy and Tuppence go to visit Tommy's Aunt Ada, who is living at the Sunny Ridge Retirement Home, which is a large, I think, Victorian house overlooking a garden, and has a number of rooms and passageways and studies and so forth. And while Tommy is in visiting with his very cranky Aunt Ada, Tuppence goes down and sits in one of the parlors near a fireplace and has a visit and a chat with one of the residents there, a Mrs. Lancaster. And she's an elderly lady, and she's sort of rambling on somewhat incoherently, but she's very sweet. And all of a sudden, she blurts out to Tuppence, "Was it your child there behind the fireplace?" And it's kind of a creepy statement to make, and Tuppence isn't sure what to think of it. And then she thinks, oh, the poor old dear. She doesn't really know what she's talking about. Well, the mystery starts there, and it's compounded by the fact that there are several deaths at Sunny Ridge in a row, and kind of unexplained because the residents weren't particularly ill. And Mrs. Lancaster is suddenly taken away, and she's disappeared. And this sort of sets Tuppence to thinking there's something not quite right here. And so she decides to follow the trail to see if she can locate Mrs. Lancaster. And the mystery unfolds and starts to involve some other aspects. There's a painting of a charming house, a very old house, next to a canal somewhere in the countryside. And there are the residents of a small, strange village, and they're all sort of suspicious. And a number of other deaths that occurred in the past. So she and Tommy, to some extent, try to figure out what's going on and solve the mystery in By the Pricking of My Thumbs. It's a great one, and you should pick it up. I did want to say that we're always talking about what wonderful mysteries Agatha Christie gives us and the plots, but not as frequently do we hear about her sense of humor and the comic elements that she presents to us. I remember when I first read Murder at the Vicarage, I was really struck by the humor, and I laughed out loud several times, especially at the vicar and his wife and their relationship and the way they get along with each other. And there's just such great irony and absurdity, and Agatha Christie just strikes that perfect balance between what's really horrific in the mind of a murderer and what's ghastly and gruesome and creepy, but it's also infused with a kind of humor, because it's a dark humor, but it's really lovely. It's sort of the same sense of humor that my elderly great aunt and grandmother had, and when I was growing up, it was just fun to listen to them and have a good laugh. And I think sometimes we miss that when we're discussing Agatha Christie, is that she really has a marvelous, wicked sense of humor. Well, the rest of the books that I wanted to share with you are now on my TBR pile. I've just shared all the ones I've read so far, and so I'm looking forward to getting to these next titles. And the next one up is also a mystery. If you followed my channel at all, you do know that I love Nancy Drew. And I read the works of the Stratemeyer Syndicate. They have a number of Mystery Girls series available out there, Girl Sleuths. And so if you haven't seen my Nancy Drew video, feel free to look that one up. I'll put it in the links below. And this is one that I found, which is called By the Light of the Study Lamp. And it's the very first in the Dana Girls mystery stories. I haven't read any of the Dana Girls stories, so I'm really looking forward to this. And I'll just read you the premise from my notes here, so I'll be turning this way a little bit. The Dana Girls, who you can see on the spine here, and this is from the 1930s, by the way. Louise and Jean Dana, orphan sisters living in the town of Oak Falls, received the gift of an antique study lamp as a parcel from their Uncle Ned Dana, skipper of the SS Alaska, as they are packing to return to their school in nearby Penfield for a second year. So this takes place in the fall, which is perfect for this time of year. While the girls are distracted, having gone to the aid of their clumsy maid, Cora Applecore Appel, the lamp is stolen from their home, and though the sisters give chase in the family roadster, of course it's a roadster, their search reaches a dead end at an antique store run by the sinister Jake Garbon. So the mystery continues on from there, and there are quite a few Dana Girls mysteries, so I'm excited to begin this series. Well, the next book was a lovely and charming find for me. It's a title I had never actually heard of before, and I happened to just be browsing in Barnes & Noble one day, and they were featuring 2 books by this author as what they call rediscovered classics. And the one I'm reading currently is called Now in November, a novel by Josephine W. Johnson. I had never heard of this title, and I had never heard of Josephine Johnson, so I decided to do a little bit of research on her. And she wrote a number of books, but this novel in particular was published in 1934, and it actually won the Pulitzer Prize in 1935. And so that perked up my ears. I was very interested in reading it. And I had never heard of her, never knew she had won a Pulitzer Prize. She was actually the youngest person at that time and the youngest woman to win the Pulitzer Prize. And I'll read you the premise of this. I think this is a really lovely cover as well. Okay, so a lost gem of 20th century literature, Josephine W. Johnson's 1934 Pulitzer Prize-winning novel follows a year in the life of a family struggling to survive the Dust Bowl. Published when she was only 24, it's a beautiful story and account told of one farming family's challenges to scrape by and earn a living from mortgaged land over the course of a single year. Narrated by one of 3 sisters, the introspective and thoughtful Margaret. As the household is ravaged by Depression-era hardship and the environmental blights of the Dust Bowl, the family's unique vulnerabilities are pushed to a breaking point. In a style typical of Johnson's body of work, Now in November is strikingly ahead of its time, grappling with questions of mental health, workers' rights, as well as gender, race, and class, and is ready to be rediscovered by a new generation of readers. And here is a picture of Josephine Johnson on the back there. Apparently she was also an environmental writer, and because Barnes & Noble did have several of her books, I decided to also pick up The Inland Island, A Year in Nature. And this is about life on her 37-acre farm in Ohio that she and her husband reverted to wilderness over several decades. This was published in 1969, and so I believe it's really sort of ahead of its time. There are a lot of popular books on rewilding farmland now in 2022. She was reminiscing about this back in 1969, so I believe she really was ahead of her time, and I'll be interested to read this as well because I do enjoy environmental writing and the story of how properties are rewilded. Well, I'm so excited to share my very first 2 titles from Dean Street Press. Very excited when I received these in the mail. And these are 2 books that I purchased, and I'll show you the covers. They're just beautiful. All of the Dean Street Press covers have this sort of house border on their books and then a different picture inside. They include some memoir, they have a list of mysteries available, and a number of novels written by women writers from the first part of the 20th century. And so the two that I decided to start with are Table 2 by Marjorie Wilenski. This is a novel, and it's set during the London Blitz in World War II. The premise of this is, let's see, it follows an office of women translators at the fictional Ministry of Foreign Intelligence in London as they bicker, maneuver, and shift allegiances just before and then in the thick of the London Blitz. And so this looked really interesting to me. Of course, it's about the Blitz, the bombing by Hitler of London in 1940, starting in the fall and continuing through the spring of 1941. And so reading about the Blitz in the month of November I thought was appropriate. And so this is a novel. And then the one that I'm really eager to begin probably first is a Chelsea Concerto. I'm not sure if I'll be pronouncing her name correctly, but I'm saying it as Frances Faviell. I hope that's correct. And this is actually a memoir. "Take off your coat," said the doctor. I took it off. "And your dress," he said. "It's too dangerous. The folds may catch in the debris and bring the whole thing down." I took off the dress. "Fine," he said shortly. "It'll have to be head first. We'll hold your thighs. Go down and see if it's possible to give an injection. Can you grip the torch with your teeth?" Frances Faviell lived in Chelsea before and during the London Blitz, having become a Red Cross volunteer when World War II began. Chelsea was particularly heavily bombed, and the author was often in the heart of the action, witnessing or involved in fascinating and horrific events through 1940 and 41. Her memoir evokes an unforgettable cast, Londoners and refugees alike, caught up together in extraordinarily dangerous times, not forgetting the green cat, a Chinese statuette, standing on the author's windowsill as the home's talismanic protector. So this looked really, really good to me. I'm particularly interested in this memoir also because I plan on watching Lucy Worsley's special documentary on the London Blitz, and it's called Blitz Spirit. And so she talks about the bombings on London, and she does so through the eyes of 6 eyewitness accounts of people who actually lived through the London Blitz in World War II, and one of them was Frances Faviell. So I'm really looking forward to reading this, and I've already sort of peeked at the first chapters, and it just looks really good. I'm particularly fond of oral interviews and first-person accounts of World War II because I had the opportunity myself when I was a librarian at a library here in Western New York State of collecting oral interviews with people who had lived through World War II here on the home front. And that was through the auspices of Washington College, and it was called the National Homefront Project. And I would actually drive in my car and go around Western New York State with an old-fashioned tape recorder and microphone, and I would take down notes and record the reminiscences of elderly people during World War II, remembering victory gardens, war bonds, canteen dances, what it was like to hear about D-Day on the radio, and what it was like to grow up and have your neighbors go away and go to war. So it's a project that was very near and dear to me personally, and I will link below the website for the National Homefront Project in case you're interested in listening to any of those oral histories as well. And finally, I'm really looking forward to having a read of Claire Keegan's Small Things Like This. This is a novella, It's a hardcover edition that I've purchased, and I really love the painting that they have on the cover of this. It is 1985 in an Irish town. During the weeks leading up to Christmas, Bill Furlong, a coal and timber merchant, faces his busiest season. As he does the rounds, he feels the past rising up to meet him and encounters the complicit silences of a people controlled by the church. So I have a feeling this is going to be about the Magdalen laundries, but I'm not quite sure. It does take place in the weeks leading up to Christmas, and so I thought this was an appropriate time of the year to read this. And I don't read an awful lot of literature that's set in Ireland, and so I am looking quite forward to getting into this one as well. That's all the titles I have for now. I hope you've enjoyed seeing what I've read and what I'm going to be reading. I may do a separate November video on November nonfiction. I particularly love nature writing, and so if I have time, I will pop on with another video soon with some more titles for you. In the interim, please let me know what you're reading below, or if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. And as usual, have a wonderful day. Enjoy the month of November, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.